Yearning to play a few rounds of Gwent. That ought to set me straight.
Welcome to Commander's Horn, everybody. It is episode 121, and I am joined by my friend Skellige Ambassador Shinmiri and Team Leviathan Gaming Spyro ZA. We're going to be talking about a pretty diverse meta in the Season of the Cat Iron Judgment deep into October on this episode of Commander's Horn. Welcome back to Commander's Horn, everybody. It is October 24th, 2019, a great day for what used to be a weekly Commander's Horn podcast and is now a bi-monthly Commander's Horn podcast, as I'm trying to get the chat on my screen without actually blocking anybody off, and I can't grab this window, and now Shinmiri can be seen. Spyro, Shinmiri, thanks for joining me on the episode. How are you, my friends? How are you enjoying Season of the Cat Iron Judgment? How are your lives in general? Let's just catch up.
Doing well. I recently moved from an apartment to a house, so
Nice.
I've been settling in. But yeah, doing pretty well. Enjoying the meta, enjoying the season.
Right on. And you were just recovering from being a little sick too, as well. I imagine. You
feeling
a
much
bit
better though.
That's good. That's
Thank
good.
you.
Spyro, how you doing now that load shedding actually has you able to live your life, do what you want to do?
I was about to say we got power, so that's great.
Yeah, I mean it starts with power, right?
Yeah, got power. I mean, that's a good start to the day. Always when you wake up and actually have electricity. But otherwise, yeah, not doing too bad. I'm really enjoying this season. Definitely been a very diverse season for me so far. So very much enjoying the change of pace to a very diverse meta so far.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that it is a pretty diverse meta right now, and I think that Iron Judgment added a lot of new ways to play. I think the big thing is how defenders have kind of changed how cards like Damien and Skellen have allowed. Nilfgaard is the main example I can think of. I feel like you could use examples like Artis and Gellus as well as these 5-strength kind of permanent effect units that are now protected with defender options. But really, it seems like Nilfgaard has been making the most use of it. But it doesn't mean that Nilfgaard is above and beyond better because they are making probably the best use out of the defender. Syndicate as well, I guess. But in general, I mean, it seems like it's just pretty diverse out there. It seems like every time I play, I think I tweeted the other week, I hit a new record in how long it took me to see all 6 factions. 9 games one day. 9 games to see all 6 factions. Even Skellige S. I'm still doing the pre-rank. I've been a little busy, but I do see everything out there. You think there's something viable for every faction right now, guys? Sorry, I didn't mean to.
Yeah, that's really awesome. I've never looked at the stat before, like how many games it takes you to see 6 factions.
Mm-hmm.
But like I would be wondering, like in the past, in the full test DJ meta, how many games it would take on average to see 6 factions. It
would never happen. I think
there was it just wouldn't happen.
Well, Skellige still is pretty rare, I think.
Yeah, it's still pretty rare, but I think they're underappreciated.
Of course you do. You're the faction ambassador.
I have to say that.
I've got a lot of white screen glow, and now the sun just came out, and there's a window in front of me, so I'm looking extra ghoulish today. So I'm struggling with my lighting. I don't know. You just moved, Shinmiri. Did you immediately have, like, when you were moving, did you look at, like, the room you were going to stream at? Like, this is going to be my streaming room. This is going to be the best lit area. I feel like I did that, and I've been let down by what I thought was going to work and what is actually true.
I did take that into consideration, and so far it's been fine. The only issue that I have right now is that I don't have enough stuff in this room. This room is a lot bigger than the room that I used to stream in, and it's got an echo.
Yeah, a little bit.
Or it has a little bit of an echo, and people have noticed it. But I just need to get like more furniture or a shelf or something in here at some point.
You can get one of those like sound blocking like wall things that I've seen some streamers have. You know what I'm talking about? There we go. I closed the window.
Nope, I don't. It's like just like a curtain or something.
No, it's like I've seen like you can get like these foam, like they're these ridged foam like squares that you can put. Okay. I don't know if they work, but I've seen people with them. They kind of just like absorb sound and it just takes the echo. It's like the insulating effect of snow on like a snowy day. Just kind of sucks the sound away.
Makes sense.
I don't know. And Spyro, how's streaming going for you down in South Africa? You've been streaming on a pretty regular basis. I see you almost every day out there. You show up in my stream as well.
Yeah, I mean, I had yesterday a day where I couldn't stream because of the load shedding, but if I have power and nothing disrupts me, and there's no like today with matchmaking had to end the stream a bit early due to the fact that I couldn't find opponents. But if there's no disruptions that are out of my control, I pretty much will stream every day. But yeah.
Yeah, right on. It's good to have that kind of time as well. So I just want to say before we get started in talking about kind of the world of Gwent that we're playing in right now, I want to say this episode is recorded live at twitch.tv/McBearded, where I'm preparing to continue to make all sorts of stuff and do all sorts of streaming as I normally do. For some reason, I have this scripted from yesterday or from last podcast, and I had to improv that one. So this episode is also brought to you by the Commandos, our patrons at patreon.com/CommandersHorn.
Commandos!
Follow Commanders Horn at Commanders Horn on Twitter for updates about the show. And that's all I really wanted to say. I just want to say thanks, of course, to everybody who supports the show. And, of course, to you, both of you, for coming on, helping me make some content as well. Anyway, so we're talking about a diverse meta right now. So I just played a game right before this stream started. Just played a game I thought I would just like warm up with whatever. I thought, let's just play Congregate. Let's play some Cyrus. Syndicate. Let's play some Sacred Flame stuff, see if we can win a long round. And didn't I just queue into somebody who had Heatwave? Sure. And also Lambert, which is really too bad because I think that it's for Erica's Swarm that's out there. But I felt like at the end of the game that it was like a waste of time, like I had no chance. But that person was still preparing for a very specific matchup. But Swarm is not the only matchup that's out there. How would you normally prepare your deck to engage a ladder where it could be anything? Enslave, Deathwish, Bleed, Swarm, Dwarves, Northern Realms Engines, Unitless Round 3, control garbage that can come from any faction, Wildcard Syndicate. You know, how do we prepare decks these days? I'll throw that to you, Shinmiri.
Well,
first.
for me,
Spyro, you go ahead.
Well, for me personally, I tend to put a lot of zaps in my deck. For obviously the whole Damien Stefan shenanigans that you can see. Nilfgaard, obviously, Azur's Thunders are still very good against a lot of cards in the meta, such as Redanian Archer in Northern Realms, which is a card that it's very difficult to trade up on or trade evenly to. So I like to put a Thunder or two in most of my decks to deal with some of those cards that you just want to be able to answer just immediately. And also it also takes a bit of meta evaluation. Like the meta's been shifting. I've noticed week to week. There's been like last week there was a lot of Swarm, and this week it's kind of died down a bit. And due to the way the meta shifts, I think every week you kind of might take in a card or two depending on how the meta's looking that week. So I think like Lambert was very much like last week's meta tech, and this week there's a lot of Nilfgaard. So maybe
there is, yeah.
Azur's Thunder is a nice tech against that. So it depends on the meta, and the meta is shifting constantly. I've noticed every week there's like a different meta, and I've definitely been noticing this because I've been casting some league games with Bushhook, and every week there's a new lineup, and every time we see the second week or the first week games, we're seeing different lineups being brought. So it's a good testament to how the meta is constantly shifting, which is very, very interesting to see.
I definitely agree with the fact that the meta is constantly shifting week to week. I think like at the first 2 weeks of the patch, we saw a lot of like engine greediness stuff, especially with like Damien and Skellen, and pretty much every faction, every deck was playing some sort of like greedy engine deck. And then at some point, Control Calanthe started popping up on the meta a lot, whether it's the shoot version or not. And people realized, hey, you can actually still control these engine decks, especially if you can get past their defender. They start playing 5 for 11s and 5 for 10s in Damien and Skellen if they get removed. And then, that caused Nilfgaard to drop off. And then people started playing some no unit decks like the Arrakis Swarm to kind of target those control decks as well. For me personally, when I build my decks, I still try to throw in a significant number of like single target removals, like Spyro was saying with the Zaps or Thunders, to have the ability to remove a few 5-point threats.
Yeah.
Whether it's going to be Damien or Skellen, and there's stuff like Caleb Mangay or like Ewald. Even if you don't match up against like say Nilfgaard, every deck right now, especially in their bronzes, are still playing some engine, some cheap stuff that can get a pretty good ceiling, a pretty good value ceiling if they go unanswered. So yeah. I still think single target removal is good.
it's difficult sometimes. You got to pick when to use those answers, especially if you're only running one or two things, or if you're just running like
Yeah.
maybe something specific, like a Purify for Helga in some situations, like the Moondust, I mean, or if you're, we're going back a meta when Northern Wind was huge for the banish. So
One thing I really
always need
noticed,
something, right?
One thing I really noticed when deck building is like how difficult it is now to find an efficient way to answer 5-point threats or taller. Like Thunder is a lot of decks are just forced to run Thunder.
Yeah.
Like you have some faction specific stuff like Hjalmar or Philippa, or like 2-card combos with leader, like Wild Card Graydon or Anseus plus a booster. But it's really rare now to have like an efficient way to trade up to a 5-point threat.
Especially if you need to also remove a defender as well, and you only really have one turn to remove that threat before it gets already out of control. And I think Skellen is the best example, I think, and Damien as well. It's just like it's all about the Nilfgaard matchups are just all about can I answer or not Damien and Skellen. Like, can I answer? Like the Lambert tech is interesting because it's very specific. The Thunder at least answers a bunch of other stuff, as well as Heatwave for defenders or Invocation, I guess, if you're Nilfgaard, or something else. But I mean, the fact that you're looking at tournaments, Spyro, I guess, and everybody, if we're looking at tournaments and we're looking at a meta that's constantly changing, even though no balancing is happening, we're still seeing lineups shift from week to week. That seems to me a sign of a very healthy balanced kind of competitive landscape. As far as the tournaments that you've been watching, because you've probably had more competitive eyes on than I have over the past few weeks, Spyro, would you agree with that statement that the balance and kind of the level of the game is in a healthy state, or are there still some really glaring issues that are hurting the competitive scene?
I mean, there are still a few issues, but I think this is probably the healthiest meta we've had in a long time, months, I would say. There's a lot of variety. Before the last couple of metas, we had very like polarized matchups, and there were a few, leaders or decks rather, that saw just a lot of play, like Faltist and Francesca, now called Mystic Echo. But those type of decks were like dominating the meta. Whereas this season, like, I mean, we saw like Death Shadow or Unseat Elder, if you guys want to call it by the leader abilities. We saw like 1 week there was a lot of Death Wish. Then the next week it started, monsters kind of shifted towards like a swarm type of deck. And then, it shifted again, and now people are trying out like various things like unitless monsters. And Nilfgaard has been through so many iterations this season alone. We saw Seas 6, then we saw back to Seas 5. Now, it like all the factions, and with Calanthe also, it started off with a very engine-heavy type of Calanthe list in the beginning of the season. It was a very engine-heavy. Then we got to control Calanthe, and now we're seeing a more mid-rangey type of Calanthe that's recently been popping off on the ladder. And all the factions are kind of like shifting every week, and it's very, very interesting to see. But that being said, there are still a few issues, and I believe there are some cards that are also problematic, such as Dire Mutated Hound, Redane Archer. Some of these cards are just very, very difficult to trade up against. Like, you can deal with them, but it's very, very inefficient. Yeah, and Draga Larva is another very good example. You can deal with them, but the ways you deal with them are usually very, very inefficient, and means those cards become almost auto-include in their various factions. And every deck, no matter what they are, just pretty much running those cards.
I mean, that's right. You're talking about trading. Like in Dragolarv as an example, it's a 5-point card that creates 2 1-point Thrivers with 2 armor. So to remove one of those, you need to deal 3 damage to it, but it's growing every turn. So there's really just nothing at 5 provisions that comes close to really stopping that in any way. Like, it's just, that's probably one of the best examples, I think, and the 2 examples that you gave. Shinmiri, how do you feel about the constantly shifting meta? Would you agree that it's the result of a balanced game, or do you think that there's still some really glaring stuff?
Yeah, I think it's a sign of a relatively balanced game, and I think it's the shifting meta is something that we do see pretty much every big expansion. I think early on people tend to gravitate towards the greedier strategies, to focus on their own strategy, how they can maximize points, flashy combos. And then I think this patch, more than any previous patch, people had less faith in control. People have been seeing the nerfs to control for the past few months and the buffs to engines and thinking, man, maybe it's going to be an engine meta and control's just not worth trying out anymore. But I think people still managed to find eventually some decent control lists, especially the Calanthe control one. And then once that, I think that was the big push to shift the meta in a different direction. Once people saw the success and started playing some control list, that pushed the meta to adapt again.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we would have been stuck in like a more engine-heavy meta.
I mean, for a while, people were saying control wasn't really around because it was a bleed meta, 2-0 meta, combo cards. Two leaders that play 2 cards at once were really kind of dictating how dangerous it was to pass against any of these decks because of the 2-card combo they could set up that could push you completely out of a game. But that itself shifts because that means that control has a chance to rise because that's exactly what you need to stop something like that. Would you agree? Like, how would you feel? Control didn't feel very good when we started, but I think it's much more. I feel like it's almost required now. You need to have some, if not a lot of hard control.
I think the big thing that helped push Control and R onto the scene was the addition of cards that can deal with 2 engines in one turn, like Philippa Blind Fury, especially, right? Like, what people really had trouble with those like 2-card combos that open around and put multiple engines on the board, like either Portal or like Mystic Echoes, Water of Broccolon that put 2 4s on the board. There weren't that many cards before this expansion that could kind of deal with those 2 4-point engines very effectively. Philippa Blind Fury is like the new one that actually cleans that up in one card.
And they kept buffing these cards too.
Northern Realms to have such a good control deck.
And they kept buffing these cards too, like the fledglings going up, like when all the 4P cards went up in value, and then all of a sudden, and also removal went up in price, you could say. Yep. It made it so things were sticking, right? So I think that people were having a problem with the fact that the removal is priced so well that nothing would stick, so no strategies would go off. But the inverse is where if your strategy executes, it's like gets extremely hard to lose if you are the one with the setup and the control of the board. So, being able to set up a couple of engines that ping, you have reach to kill pretty much anything your opponent can do. And that's just because you had the virtue of going first, which is a whole other conversation. Going first is now favorable in a lot of situations, it seems like. Spyro, have you seen a lot of, as far as like tournament, I keep wanting to ask you about tournament stuff because I know you and Bushy have been doing like a lot of stuff right now and like seeing a lot of games. Going first doesn't look that bad anymore, does it?
It depends on the matchup. If you're a deck that has like a big finisher and you want to protect that by having final say, then you do want to be able to go second or have final say. If you're an engine-based deck and your opponent's playing an engine-based deck especially, and you're both playing engine-based deck, then first say is very, very, very important. It depends a lot on the matchup, and it depends a lot on what kind of finishers or combo pieces you have. Because especially like, for example, Syndicate Mirror with the whole Savola thing and Graydon, that mirror is... I actually hate that mirror because it all comes down to, well, not all, but a big part of it comes down to final say. Because whoever has final say gets a massive finisher with their Graydon onto their opponent's Savola. And that's an example where you really, really want final say. So it depends a bit on the matchup. Some matchups you really want first say, some matchups you really want final say. It depends a bit on the situation.
I find it interesting that you bring that up because, yes, I do think that final say is important in a lot of matchups, but I also think that sometimes it's easier to win round 1 to get that final say on blue coin or going first. It just depends on how reactive the 2 decks. Sometimes, with the extra 5 points from tactical advantage, it makes it much harder for your opponent to win round 1 when you have those extra points.
Yeah, no, definitely. Especially like in a Nilfgaard mirror where you can like play, for example, the person that has to go first in round 1 gets to utilize tactical advantage and they can use it to protect an engine such as Hefty Helga.
Yeah.
And then if your opponent can't answer Hefty Helga, you just pretty much win round 1 because that's just how it is. And so that tactical advantage actually really can make a big, big difference in certain matchups and very much help decks win round 1. And if you want to win round 1 badly and your deck revolves around winning round 1 in a given matchup, that going first can actually really make a difference.
I mean, I agree. It feels like there's more options to play the game right now. I think that we saw a lot of competitive metas in Gwent and all of its different metas over the course of its history, where it was just becoming very, very clear that if you just got more cards, or if you just, you always took a certain line of play and in a specific matchup, you were always favored because of card advantage. But now, especially with the tactical advantage, I agree. It's it's much more interesting. I also think it's really funny in the chat right now. There's a debate about what we said about Andrega Larva being about trading, and there's somebody in the chat that's saying like all these things that deal with armor and deal damage are the things that can deal with larva. And I think the point that I was trying to make is that it deals with one of the larvas, not both of the larvas. And the fact that Sandstorm is the only thing we can think of that might be able to deal with both larvas, the fact that they would have to even be like next to each other, or they'd have to be like in the proper position as well for that to even work. So it's the fact that it creates two of the bodies very specifically, not just the fact that you can't deal 3 damage to something.
I've done the math on it, and if you do the math on Andrega Larvas, if you try, I mean, they're playing 2 points each on deploy with 2 armor each. If you want to kill one, you need, let's say, a 3 damage card, so it's already playing for 3 points the first half of it. And then to deal the second one, the opponent's most likely going to play something to thrive up the second one after that, which means it goes to 2 points with 2 armor. So you need 4 damage for the second one. So if you want to deal with both of them, you need 7 damage and 2 cards. So it's already playing basically a 7 for 5 if they both get answered. So its floor is a 7-point card, and its ceiling is, I don't know, like 20 points.
So if it's answered, it's already like the high rate that most conditional 5-point cards do to hit 7. So yeah, it's pretty clear that card's really good. But we could have just called the podcast Andrega Larva, and then we could have just talked about this card. So I mean, obviously the diverse meta is really fun. It's very refreshing. There's a lot of things you can enjoy about it. But do you think there's any downsides to a diverse meta? Like, can it be frustrating to prepare for this kind of thing? It just seems to be like most card games, they strive for something that, like, for balance, to feel like things are changing all the time and there's strategies that are always available. Do you think that there is any downside to something like this happening? I don't know.
The only thing that pops to my mind immediately is, like, for certain types of players that enjoy targeting specific strategies, it's maybe it's harder for them to enjoy the game the way they want to enjoy it by, like, targeting certain strategies, because the meta is diverse enough that they're never going to find that one target that often.
So you got to do the soft targeting. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, I believe that it should be good for most players to have a diverse meta. Although, as Shinmiri mentioned, some type of players, they don't play that often. So if they leave, let's say they play Gwent this week and then they come back next week and now it's a completely new meta, I guess that could be daunting for some people. But I mean, for the majority of people, I think it's pretty healthy. But yeah, there might be some people that play very casually and might prefer a more stable meta, I guess you could say. But that's just personal preference, I guess.
I do like the fact that, there are strats that, like, you can put Geralt Erden into a deck in a certain metas where it would catch more matchups if, the decks that create boosts were the most popular things. But it just seems like swarms out there, but also tall strategies are out there as well. Engine strategies are out there as well. Control strategies are out there as well. So it's even hard. It seems even harder to soft target right now. Yeah. And but I think that the ability to get those wins is really obviously the most important part. So if you had to take a deck out there right now and say it's the strongest deck, I mean, I'm pretty sure I know what you guys are going to say. Pretty sure I know what you're going to say. I'm going to guess you're going to say Syndicate. But what would you say the strongest ladder, and why is it able to still be the strongest deck in the face of so many possible opponents?
So yeah, for my vote, it would be Syndicate. And I think the key that makes Syndicate the strongest deck right now is, one, they have really good card quality, but 2, they're also a very flexible deck and a flexible game plan. Like, they have answers to a wide variety of things. They have tall removal in Kraden and Moriels. They have wide removal in Ewald. They have proactive points in, like, Hound and Savola. They have good long rounds and they have good short rounds.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. I mean, I agree. Syndicate also, in my opinion, is the strongest deck right now because it's very flexible, as Shinmiri mentioned. And the pros of Ewald 2, but Moriels and Graydon, it's so good to have those cards because they are so flexible. Unlike Geralt, which is a card that can swing for a lot of points. Vanilla Geralt, the one that destroys a 9-point enemy or higher. Moriels and Graydon are flexible. They can be engine removal. You deal 4 damage, kill an engine, or maybe you're in a matchup where your opponent plays very, very tall units, and then you can use the tribute on Moriels or maybe even Graydon and deal with tall units. So they're very, very flexible. They can either deal with engines or they can deal with tall units, and that makes them very, very strong. And also cards like Earvolt can deal with multiple threats in once. Philippa gives you Seize, which is almost like a budget Ardle ability. You basically have just all the pros of like almost every deck in one package in one deck, which just makes it very, very strong. But I would like to give an honorable mention to a deck that I feel is very, very strong right now. It's mid-range Calanthe. I feel like it's a very, very good deck for ladder least because it's very, very flexible as well. It's not super targetable because it doesn't really have any like particular synergies of its own that it can be broken apart by maybe control or whatnot. But it's very, very flexible, and you can deal with almost every type of deck with it quite reliably. It makes it a very, very nice deck to play on ladder because you don't really have many situations where you go, oh damn, I queued into X, Y, or Z.
Yeah.
You're kind of okay with queuing into almost everything with that deck, which I quite enjoy about it.
Yeah, that's what you want.
Yeah, I agree.
Shinmiri, so you're talking about mid-range Calanthe, and we're talking about pincer maneuver in this situation. So Shinmiri, you played Control NR recently, like putting in cards like Philippa and putting in a little bit more tech against actually dealing with these engines. How similar is that to this mid-range version? The mid-range Calanthe you're talking about, is it using Dandelion Visagoda?
It's using Avalach. No, not Visgoda. It's using Avalach, the one that spawns weather. It's using Portal. Yeah, it's not bad. It helps set up. It helps. What the nice about it is that you can set on like a frost on your opponent's side of the board, and then you can like use this chip away at your opponent's card and set up things like Phaliber or maybe some of your 2 damage cards. Just set up your other removal.
So cool.
It's actually very underrated. And then it uses Portal for a bit more points of its own. It's just not as all in on the control, but it has some good control of its own, but it also has a decent amount of its own points that it can use, which is, I guess, separates it or differentiates it from Control Calanthe a little bit.
Yeah, so I think what happened was Control Calanthe first came on into the meta because the meta was super greedy, and when I was first playing Control Calanthe like a week and a half ago or so, I even found that I was running out of removals, even when every single gold in my deck was removals. It's just how many engines people were playing at the time.
Yeah.
And now when I pilot the deck, it feels like I have too much because people have shifted away from running like engine after engine after engine. And that's why maybe the mid-range Calanthe version is a little bit better right now because you pull back a little bit on the control and you give yourself some proactive points through the Portal and the Kedweni Knights and the Avalok, which is just like a 12 for 10. Instead of the Avalok, the Control Calanthe would probably play something like maybe Betsy, which could be like an 8 for 10, and there's potentially 4 points right there that you're missing out on if you don't need that 4 damage removal.
I like Betsy in the Syndicate matchup because you can punch the Hound, and then if they reactivate it, you can just muzzle it. So I mean, I like Betsy. It's funny. I've been running a couple of cards just because, like, on suggestion, like the fact that I was actually running mostly your gold package for your control list, and then I kind of redid the bronzes. But Betsy really, I felt, performed quite well. Knocks Figus out of the picture immediately. Can just deals with the Redanian Archer immediately, like just really has a lot of good situations with every faction. But let's talk about Avalok, because 2 days ago, I think I was playing Elves, just because, Harmony and Dwarves, they're getting all the big play for scoia'tael. I like to mess around on my stream. And, Igni Shiro shenanigans are always great for highlights, and it's really hard to stop that when you're playing like Precision Strike. But I was playing Avalok because he's an elf, so he boosts up your Vryad Vanguards and stuff. But that card is good because shoutouts to Weather. Like, we've been in a bleed meta for so long. Weather ticking at the beginning of your opponent's turn, that's great. I forgot how good that was. And, your opponent just plays into it sometimes because they don't want to think, oh, they're trying to encourage me to stack the other row because I'm already playing Elves, so I'm probably already playing something like Igni. But I just like that, it chips away and it makes every ping that much better and much easier to, it gives you the reach you need without them no one's running scouts, right? That's never going to get cleared.
Oh, yeah. Nobody's running artifact removal. Nobody's running weather removal.
Well, Heatwave's around.
Oh, Heatwave is artifact removal. Yeah, that's true.
I hate
the
it.
Glorified 10-point D-bomb.
Yeah, the 10-point D-bomb. The thing.
Technically, it is artifact removal, but
Yeah.
I mean, if D-bomb had an alternate mode, you'd consider, right? Well, I mean, Eventide Plunder
If
doesn't,
it,
but I think it's just very flexible. Sorry, I keep pausing at a weird time, but I think Heatwave is. It's. I don't like using it, but it seems like it has a lot of application.
I want to go back to something that we were talking about before with Syndicate, and I don't know if this is going to take up too much time, but I think I want to talk a little bit about Graydon. I think Graydon is like an insane card now that people can play wild card and guarantee the Graydon value. If you look at the math behind, like, I think this is one of the reasons why Syndicate is so good right now. Graydon is just like completely bonkers. He's a card that scales with respect to 3 times your opponent's strength or base strength. He gets the removal value, he gets the bounty value, and he gets the boost value because he boosts based on your opponent's. So it's the math behind it is like 3 times X plus 3 or something like that, and there's just nothing else like that. Like even Regis Higher Vampire is like 2X, right? Because you steal the boost and you get it for yourself. And with Wildcard you guarantee it. It's a little too good with the uninterruptible combo with Leader.
Yeah, I think a lot of people. I mean, I think that stuff like this that's this good is usually you can argue against the faction, but this is just like one more thing this faction can do. This faction's already doing a bunch of other super strong stuff as well.
And usually tall removal,
more else.
Usually tall removal can brick, right? Like Geralt of Rivia or Leo Bonhart. Or I don't know, like even Heatwave, I guess, or Peter. Those cards can brick. Heatwave can be like a 6 or a 7, which is not great for it. But Graydon with Leader, it can't brick anymore.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, it's difficult to balance that because the fact is, like, Graydon, if you play in a deck like, let's say, Dijkstra or Line Pockets now, it's significantly worse because it can brick. And I mean, I've played many times in the past where I've played Line Pockets with Graydon, and it can very much easily brick.
Yes.
It's with the combo, as you mentioned, with Wildcard that it becomes so nutty because it's something you could do in one turn. You don't have to the thing is, you can use it to answer something immediately. If your opponent plays something tall in round 3 or whenever you want to use it, if your opponent even plays Damien, you can play Leader into Graydon and one turn deal with it. Whereas if you played in Line Pockets, you wouldn't be able to. If you wanted to even answer something, you'd have to first play a bounty, and the next turn you'd only be able to play Graydon. So your opponent has time to react. The ability to do it both in one turn makes Graydon so much more potent. I think that's what really makes it so much so problematic sometimes.
Makes Blood Money seem like kind of a lame ability now. I mean, you can use Wildcard to assure that something is getting removed and you get a whole bunch of extra value from it, whereas Blood Money, you only get like a little bit of extra value and there's a limit on what you can remove. When you put those two together in this card set, I can see why Syndicate... I mean, it seems like Syndicate just has this one deck, right? There's so many strong cards in the faction. No, I think that there's so many strong cards that I think that there's strong cards that don't see play just because of how good some of those good cards are. Like Arena Endrega is an example of, it's a long ship with Zeal, and I think that that's probably like an above average card, but the 5s are so good and the crimes are so good for Syndicate that you wouldn't even... I mean, I was playing it for fun today, but I feel like I don't see any considerations to a card like that sounds okay on paper. But all the other leaders are being left in the dust because of Wildcard. Why are we not seeing, even in a Swarm meta where we're seeing stuff like Triss and Bone Talisman show up, we're still not even seeing any Swarm tactics from Syndicate at all that has all these other great tools to support their Sacred Flame and stuff like that. Why is Wildcard why is it so far above like head and shoulders that it's beating even like preferences? Like, I just don't see any other Syndicate decks, not even from like diehards.
You just get so much value from the guaranteed tall removal.
Yeah, I mean, it's also the other leaders, the synergies that they provide are, but I mean, if you look at, for example, Jackpot, which is Gudrun, you play that for Bunsey, but the problem with Bunsey is she is something that can get very easily answered. You're playing a very greedy combo that, I mean, if it goes through, it's great. How often is Bunsey ever going to go through? Let's be real. How often are you going to get that Bunsey to stick? Almost never. That's the thing. If you look at King of Beggars, I can't remember what the name of that leader ability has been changed to now.
Off the books, I think.
Off the books, yeah. I mean, his kind of selling point is he basically lets you run a few 4 provision cards that are quite good. with things like Fence. But
Yeah.
I mean, there's already so many good 4 provision cards in Syndicate. Is it really worth running that leader ability just to run some other 4 provision cards that are, not bad, but there's so many 4 provision cards in Syndicate that are pretty good. DJ or Line Pockets is also very, very good. He's still not bad. It's just, as I mentioned, he can't be used very well with Graydon. You can't use him in combination with Graydon as a form of just instant removal / value like you can with Wildcard. So I think if hypothetically Wildcard didn't exist or got nerfed somehow, I think everyone would fall back to Line Pockets. But then again, we're gonna have the same discussion just with why is Line Pockets so much better than the others. And I mean, it feels like there's a hierarchy of leaders in Syndicate, and honestly it feels like that with a lot of factions. Even there's a lot of factions with very underutilized leader abilities, and Northern Realms is another example where you basically have Pincer Maneuver and Inspired Zeal and the rest just don't exist.
I mean, non-monsters, really.
Yeah,
non-monsters have one deck that shines specifically. Northern Realms has Inspired Zeal and
Pincer
I mean we see Pincer Maneuver. We see some Imperial Formation, I guess, to accompany Enslave, but it's really Enslave most of the time. But I mean, but monsters have Bleed, Death Wish, Swarm, and an obvious one that I'm forgetting. I mean, those are the big ones, but what's Bleed, Death Wish, Swarm, and
Thrive.
Yeah, Thrive. Thrive's competitive enough. I mean, I guess. I mean,
yeah, it's not bad.
You could run it out there and you could get some wins. It's not like trying to make something work. Like Gwent's not a game where you can it doesn't feel as rewarding to try and fail. I think it's losing in this game is so it's so black and white when it comes down to making the wrong decision or getting countered. So those leaders are standing above. How do we fix? I mean, it has a lot to do with the fact of leaders that play 2 cards in a turn, or leaders that facilitate these combos that more or less put you in a winning position, and it becomes your game to lose if you are in the position to use your leader, going first in a decisive round with your setup and your leader available. It just starts to feel really black and white, fighting against these combos. Would you agree with that, or is there another way to do it?
Yeah, I mean, in general, Gwent is a game about playing 1 card at a time. And these leaders are breaking that rule of the game, right? They allow you to play 2-card combos without giving your opponent a chance in between to answer them or do something about them or prepare for that. And so I think either these leaders that allow you to play these 2-card combos should be nerfed in terms of provisions, or maybe I don't think it really requires that big of an overhaul to kind of rework this sort of stuff. But I think it could just use provision nerfs, and maybe other leaders will see play at some point.
They were buffed not too far ago, though, right? They were all the single use leaders like that were given a buff. Herald is included, I guess, in this as well. But pushing them into the forefront like that, I feel like it was a test, and here they are. And now, how do we feel about it? Now we're thinking ooh, maybe we can respect that power a bit.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, these leaders' abilities it's a very big change from what we saw in open beta Gwent, where leader abilities were a card in your hand. Nowadays, a leader ability can be played on the same turn as something else. So almost always leader abilities are kind of a form of carryover in a way, if that makes sense. You don't want to play your leader round 1 because it doesn't feel, generally you don't want to be doing that because it doesn't feel very good to lose basically a whole big tempo swing you could use in round 3. But in open beta Gwent, if you think of things like Krach, because most leader abilities, it was okay to use them in round 1 or 2 or 3 because they were just another card in your hand. Obviously, the decks were built around those leader abilities. They weren't just another card in your hand, I guess, like that in that sense. But they were a card that you could play in round 1 or round 2 or round 3. Whereas now, pretty much, it's all hoard all your power for round 3. There are some situations where you will play a leader ability in round 1 or 2 or something. But for the most part, you don't typically want to play it because it is basically a form of carry that you want to preserve for round 3, if that makes sense.
For sure.
No, I hear you. I think it's just like the black and white nature of sometimes losing. But I mean, you see it a little bit. It looks a little bit better in tournament landscape, I suppose, than on the personal point of view of just being on a losing side. So there's one more thing I wanted to talk about. So you're probably hearing my dog crying because she's about to go for a walk. So that's what that is, audience. One more thing I want to talk about. So it's 3 years. I think it was yesterday, or I always get it mixed up because the beta came out on the 25th of October, but I think Homecoming came out on the 23rd of October. I'm not really sure. So we're
Homecoming was 23rd.
Was it 23rd?
I don't know what beta was.
So I think we're the day before. We're day before 3 years. 3 years old, I believe. Or is it 4 years? Is it 3 years old? I think
3 years.
3
right?
years of Gwent. Unfortunate that we didn't get any sort of. There was no real news. There's no real news section to the podcast because there was really no news about the anniversary. It seems like a little desolate out there at the moment as we wait for mobile to show up and I guess season 2 information, and it just felt like there was a real absence of news this week. I don't know if you guys have anything to add to that, but I just wanted to mention it on the podcast because it is momentous. It is 3 years of this game that we've spent so much time on.
Yeah, I mean, I joined in the beginning of open beta, so I actually don't know about the whole hand-salt promote shenanigans of closed beta, which I so infamously, I so infamously hear about. But yeah, for me, it's only been 2 years, but I mean, yeah, it's been a year since Homecoming. I believe yesterday it was a year. Yeah, we didn't see a whole lot of news about that, but I mean, I don't know what the industry stand is with regards to how game developers choose to celebrate anniversaries or whatnot, but yeah.
I personally feel that whether CDPR is going to make a big deal out of it or just let it pass, I think regardless of that, we should be celebrating the 1 year anniversary of Homecoming because I feel like the game has made massive strides and improvements since the initial release.
Yeah.
Which like especially over this past year, I think it's like the Mulligan update, decoupling leaders, changing the way leaders worked from like giving mulligans to provisions was a huge boon for the game. I feel like it allowed a lot more leaders to become viable, and it changed the way the game was played.
I really wish it came out like that. I knew as soon as I played it when they changed it in January, as soon as I played it, I'm like, this is the game right here. This is the game.
And then 3 expansions in the first year. I think that's super impressive. And like we got a lot of interesting cards and mechanics and synergies. I'm pretty happy with like where the game has come in the past year in terms of like the cards and the content. What I would like to see going forward is like more tournaments, more incentive for people to compete and innovate and and continue playing the game.
Yeah, that's definitely how I feel, especially because if you look at the past or the current system of Pro Ladder, I know now it's not that relevant because we've already pretty much seen who's exactly going to qualify for Masters and whatnot. But with at least for me, I'm not sure how many people felt like this, but for me, it felt very daunting trying to qualify, or like thinking about trying to qualify for a Gwent Open, for example, because that was like basically a Gwent Open, Gwent challenges. That was like the end point that everyone wants to try to get to, and it was very, very difficult because only 8 people would qualify, and outside of that there wasn't that much to really do competitively in Gwent. I would really like to see some way to include more players and more ways for people to compete outside just quick community tournaments, but like some kind of official way that players can actually compete and progress in Gwent. That would, for me at least, motivate me a lot more. I don't know how other people feel about that, but for me especially, I would feel much more motivated. There was like ways in which I can progress and compete through official channels and whatnot. I would find that very enjoyable.
Sure. I mean, we always want more. I think we're always going to be hungry for more, and as long as Gwent keeps providing us more, I think we will be all very well fed. We have 2 pretty prominent people in the Gwent community in the studio today. If you have any questions for Shinmiri, Spyro, or myself, it seems like chat's very, very active. So bring the issues to us. Let's talk about them for the community here, and we'll just take the shortest break, and we will be right back. Once again, we are supported by our Commandos at patreon.com/commandorshorn. Thanks for your support and keeping the podcast going, keeping my content going. We have a question here. Jamoni saying, since patch is coming on Monday, what do you want to see in it? Well, that is coming up soon, I guess. That is It is around the corner, I guess. What is that, the 29th? It's mobile release day, so the patch is going to be coming with it. That's a good question, guys. What would you like to see in a patch? I guess if you had to pick like top 2 or 3 changes that you think would be the most beneficial to the game, what do you think it would be?
For me, in terms of nerfs, I'd like to see Syndicate get a little bit of a nerf. Specifically cards like Azur Javed and maybe Graydon. I personally don't think Luisa Savola is as much of an issue as some of the other people in the community might say. But yeah, my top 2 priority for those and Dire Mutated Hound. Top 3 would be Azur Javed, Dire Mutated Hound, and Graydon. With respect to wild card. And then for buffs, I'd like to see some more buffs. Just like we still have a lot of underplayed archetypes. Skellige really only has 1 competitive deck right now, and a lot of other factions just have archetypes that are just kind of like sitting by the sidelines because they're overshadowed or overpowered by all these play 2 cards in 1 turn type of leaders.
And poor Skellige.
Yeah, I mean,
get a new raid card and cards that don't care about raids and gutting slashes in a raid, and it's just like a weird. Skellige is always, in fact, alchemy is kind of in a weird spot. It's just poor Skellige.
I mean, yeah, Skellige is still, I think. I mean, basically, my dream for balance-wise, I want to see every faction being equally as powerful as every other faction, and every faction being completely viable. Right now, we're close to that. We are very close, but we still see, we still have some factions, particularly Skellige, which is, I think, on the weaker side. That being said, also Nilfgaard, although Nilfgaard has a playable deck, and it is actually not bad. Outside of that one playable deck, I feels like the rest of Nilfgaard, there is so much that is very, very weak in Nilfgaard. It has one good deck, but pretty much everything else is very, very weak. And I'd like to see that also change because there's a lot of underutilized leaders right now. We have so many leaders in Gwent that just don't see any play. If you look at Stockpile / Demovan, if you look at Adder, I don't remember all these names saying the leaders, not the actual ability.
Cursed
Adder,
Slash. Let's see if I remember them all.
Yeah, all these leaders. There's so many leaders. I mean, I even tried. I was quite funny. I was playing on stream the other day, and Magpie. I don't know if you remember. The challenger winner. He gave me a discard deck to try out on stream, and I tried it out. And my goodness, was it difficult to win with King Bran. I mean, I tried like 3 games. I tied 1 game, and I was like, okay, I'm taking a tie. That's good enough.
That's a win.
It was so difficult.
I was thinking about that. Was it Portal Brockfar Hunter, or is it not that?
No. It was a deck with it was a deck that was kind of like I mean, I know he used to love beasts. It's like a beast deck. It uses Corrupted Flamennica as like a finisher, but even with so many beasts in the deck, I was often playing Corrupted Flamennica for like 9 points at most, and it just felt so weak. I really would like to see some of these leader abilities either buffed or reworked, or just some way to include more leaders into the meta, because right now there's a lot of leaders just don't see any play.
There you go. All right, let's see what else we got here in the chat. This is a question directly to Shinmiri from Aussie RG. What can CDPR do to make Saris relevant?
Okay, that's a good question, actually. I like that one. So I think there's a couple things that 2 different ways that they can approach it. One, and this would be my preference, is to buff Queensguard or change the way Queensguard works. Saris either summons a Shield Maiden from your deck, which is like extra thinning, or summons a Queensguard from your deck, which would be extra value. Like, it has a thinning option and it has a value option, right? And Queensguard right now is just not good enough, mainly because of either her stats or the fact that she spawns the new one to the right instead of the left. If she spawns a new one to the left, that would be like a new prime priest target, right? Because the priest would hit it, and then the new one would spawn right next to the priest, and the priest would hit that one next turn. So something like that, change the way buff Queensguard, and then Saris will be indirectly buffed. The other option 2, would be to make Saris spawn a copy of the card rather than summon it from your deck, which could be like Roche Merciless.
A Taurus
that could be it could be too strong. I'm not sure. It would require some balancing as well. But those are the 2 options. I think one of the reasons why Saris isn't played right now is just that Queensguard isn't really an option for her. So she's really just like a tutor for Shield Maiden, and the provisions just doesn't work out. She's like an expensive Roach, the way that I looked at it when I theory crafted about her.
Are you talking about the horse? The fact that she like
the horse, yeah, exactly. Like if you play her in the deck with only Shield Maidens, you are forced to mulligan both the first Shield Maiden you draw and the second Shield Maiden you right, in order to keep Saris. But you might not draw into Saris until much later, if ever, because there's only one Saris in your deck. The Shield Maidens don't tutor the Saris. They're not like old Silver Witchers where you can draw any of those three and you get all of them out, right?
Yeah.
If they all tutored each other, then she would be great, even without Queen's Guard. But the fact that you have to mulligan your first your first Shield Maiden now to play Saris is just not worth it. When you don't play Saris, you get to keep your first Shield Maiden, and you still get pretty good 8 for 5, right? With one thinning, still pretty good.
Honestly, when I think about Skellig, I think one of the biggest issues is their golds are actually very underwhelming compared to most other factions. Like their bronzes are solid. Skellig's bronzes are actually really good, but their golds are just very lacking compared to the other factions, I believe.
Indeed, when I try to build a Skellig deck, I always find myself wanting to put in more 5 provision cards. And I end up with 25 cards in my deck. I still have like 25 provisions left. I'm like, what am I supposed to do?
It's like, let's get Dandelion Poet in here. Let's put an artifact and Caretaker. Yeah, just like kind of do. It's kind of like the Season of the Cat approach. I don't know if you guys played any of this, where you have to give your opponent your hand. I found that it's just all about tutoring stuff. You play with your deck and not with your actual hand. That's just a side note. I didn't really like the mode this month, but it is kind of a fun idea. The idea that your hand is actually, there's no value in there. All the value is actually in the deck at all times. All right, another question here from Weewolf. You guys think we should get an overhaul in faction cards like the NR rework in Skellige Nilfgaard monsters, or a number of changes enough? Well, I don't think monsters needs any help. I think monsters is either by happenstance or by just the right tweaks, they have fallen into a pretty good spot. I mean, obviously Carapace and Force of Nature seem a little underwhelming, but 4 out of 6 is that's like the gold standard right now, I think. Do you think we should see any other faction reworks, guys?
I'm not sure if we need entire reworks, because Northern Realms is a very, very weird one. And I'm kind of glad the direction they changed and took it in. But most other factions, I believe, have decent identity. Nilfgaard is a weird one. I don't exactly know what Nilfgaard's identity quite is. Like, most factions have an identity, but I'm not 100% sure what. If someone asked me to describe Nilfgaard to them, I would say it's kind of a controlly, I don't know, just steal your opponent's deck, create. I don't know how to describe
manipulation.
Nilfgaard. Like, I really don't. Like, if you ask me about monsters, I will say it's a deck that goes. They have a lot of thrive. They make use of consuming each other. They play very tall. They're very aggressive. If someone asks me about Skellige, I would say they have a lot of graveyard interaction. A lot of they make use of cards that damage each other. But when someone asks me about Nilfgaard, I don't know how to explain it. I would really like to see Nilfgaard given some more identity. Soldiers is one, but Soldiers is very weak. No one plays Soldiers. The Nilfgaard decks we do see, I don't exactly know how to even describe them.
They keep you guessing, right? That's what they do.
I would say Nilfgaard's identity is, 1, disrupting your opponent's strategy and messing with their deck in hand. 2, like playing your opponent's cards. and 3, tactics. Tactics and control. Is pretty. I think tactics and control kind of plays into tactics, right? I think kind of it's okay. Nilfgaard's identity has definitely improved over past. Yeah, when it first came out in Homecoming, it was like a mess.
Use your opponent's strength against them. Yeah, that's what Tigsar is saying in the chat. I think that Nilfgaard's actually. I think that they used to have a real problem with their identity, and I think that that's really not quite. It's really not anywhere near as it was, because the Nilfgaard decks, much better. Like the stuff that Nilfgaard does to mess with, like you can. I feel like there's a lot of different ways you can build. You could build up Nilfgaard if you wanted to play like more assimilate or not, or heavier control or not, heavier tactics or not. I like that part of it, but yeah, the fact that that the assimilate leader, you could say double cross Anna Henrietta, is not the best choice for that specifically, or even though she's a use 2 cards in 1 turn kind of thing, the fact that she doesn't have the control. And Usurper seems really bad now, personally. I think it just seems like you just don't get very much out of it.
It's interesting to me how Usurper was actually really good in one patch and then immediately became really bad. And it had nothing to do with Usurper himself. Like, he didn't change. His cards didn't really change. It was just the meta shifted. I
think the issue is that if Nilfgaard is good, Usurper is just a worse Nilfgaard deck in the matchup. in a matchup. So like you go up against Ardal, who has just like 6 more provisions than you, and also a way to unlock his leader, and you have nothing. So I think that's probably what Nilfgaard ironically is what keeps the Usurper down.
I actually think that Usurper is probably in a pretty good place in terms of design wise right now, because like that's how he should be, right? He shouldn't always be around. He should only be around when certain leaders become too strong or too prevalent in the meta. Then he can kind of come in and kind of stamp that down a little bit, right?
Man, the way you described that is so lore friendly. If you just look at the Usurper art.
Yeah. Can't say the flavor is not good with that card.
A leader is too oppressive. He just comes in and assassinates them, takes their throne.
It's like, let's settle this without us. It's like your big brother coming to help you. It's like, let's just settle this, you and me. Don't let your no leader ability. Jagger's in the chat saying, "Can I interest you in our Lord and Savior, the Great Sun?" Yeah, Jagger's is a fan of all this stuff. Of course.
I'm pretty sure Nilfgaard is both the most loved faction and the most hated faction at the same time.
You know, it's funny.
It's very, very strange.
When I make YouTube videos for Nilfgaard, they do very well. I mean, it's not. I think at the end of the day, it's all the same. But it's they spike in popularity on like the first couple hours, as opposed to like something that might just have a very even thing. People, I don't know, Nilfgaard has a real presence. It's like they had such a strong identity in Witcher 3. It's like, how bad are they? They're bad, but only if I care about Temeria. Like, or only bad if I, like, I don't know. There's a lot of, it's moral Witcher stuff, right?
Yeah,
that's why we love it.
Nilfgaard's a very interesting one, especially with the whole, yoink your opponent's entire deck and play their strategy. It can lead to some very funny games sometimes.
Yeah, buff Reddit complaints. A lot of you know what? While I have you guys, before we close off the podcast, I'm going to ask a question, because I was just remembering the complaint of the week, or the complaint of the past 2 days. It seems like lately people just hate bribery, like more than ever. It's not like it's new. It's not like it's doing anything new. Even when Nilfgaard was really strong, and the meta we were talking about, the Dijkstra full test Ardal meta of 2 months ago. Even then, it wasn't really, I don't think bribery was like the main complaining point, but now it's like everybody hates bribery. What's changed? Has anything really changed?
Yeah, because people are actually able to play it twice in one game now with Skellen. Skellen wasn't in the meta before. So,
right.
The variance just doubled because of Skellen. And now you can get Madame Louisa Savola combo from your double bribery, whereas before you couldn't.
Oh, man.
Right? You could only get like one oak instead of 2.
I think it also there's been a slight power creep, and especially with like they've added a lot of good golds that are factions using, such as things like Philippa and Philippa. So many factions have like a couple of golds that's really, really good, like Northern Realms Philippa, scoia'tael has oak. Every faction seems to have like at least like 2 or 3 really good golds. If you find that bribery, you are really hitting the jackpot there, and it can sometimes just like win you games.
It's true.
Alone. But yeah, I think that the power creep, it's gone to the point where the average value you're getting with bribery is now probably higher than what it used to be, and I think that's pretty much why it's becoming a bit more problematic.
And forget running Igni or Erden, because if you play into an Igni or Erden against Nilfgaard, they will get it. I played Erden. I played Erden for a couple of games, I think on my Tuesday stream. And I went up against 3 Nilfgaard opponents. One of them Erdened me twice with my own Erden, and then stole it. Like he briberied it, and then he stole it out of my deck, and I actually could have used it to win. It was Tailbot coming in with the host as we are actually wrapping up the podcast. But hi everybody. We're just talking about how much we love bribery. I'll ask you this though, Shinmiri. Somebody in the chat mentioning that you popularized bribery. You did a bribery spreadsheet at one point, kind of saying that it has one of the best value for provisions in the game. So when the question, now that the chat, I got to roll back up here. Somebody asked,
is it my fault?
No, somebody asked you when we can expect the next spreadsheet. Who asked that?
Oh man.
Yeah.
I mean, I could, I guess. I mean, it's obviously better than it used to be, because just like like what Spyro was saying, like the value of your opponent's card is just higher now. But yeah, I remember doing it like early in Homecoming, back when Silver Witchers was still really popular, but Bribery had a bug where it like couldn't find you starter cards.
Yeah,
so like
right.
it wouldn't find you Silver Witchers, and that bug actually made it like even better than people thought it was going to be. And so I was just like trying to give the community, a glimpse of something that they might be undervaluing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is a high RNG, high variance card. So not necessarily the best card to be super popular in the meta because
No.
it just introduces more card RNG into it. But yeah, I think maybe CDPR needs to take another look at it and see, like, as the possibilities change, they might have to adjust the provision cost of Bribery to match the average value of what's in the meta.
It's the ghost that's haunted Gwent for so long. Create the answer. And sometimes it just feels like your opponent is creating the answer, and it does not ever feel good.
Yep. I mean, I had a fun game yesterday where I played Bribery into my opponent Stefan, and then I played Stefan into another Bribery. I think I got another Damien or something crazy. It just had like 2 or 3 Damiens and Stefans on my side of the board or something crazy like that. You get some fun games like that with Bribery.
Yeah.
The solution I would like is probably just to change Bribery to find either only golds or only certain provision range, and then just raise its own provision cost. So like, I want to lower the variance of Bribery. If you want to keep Bribery and still with the create mechanic, lowering the variance always makes RNG cards feel a little bit better because neither player feels like that much cheated when someone high rolled or low.
That's the card game law, though. Like, variance is what makes RNG the worst. I mean, I know neither of you really played a lot of other card games before, so I'm not going to make any examples, but I could make some Hearthstone examples where range of cards were just like making them so strong because when the options, especially in a world where 4 provision cards and 5 provision cards like aren't that bad, like Imperial Diplomacy shows you that, yeah, sometimes you can get some bad picks when you're looking at the entire faction selection. But when you're looking within your opponent's deck, I mean, you could get a 4 provision or a 5 provision point card that's fine. So when your range goes from good to great, as opposed to from going like to below average to above average, that every card that's ever had that range has been a problem, I think, in almost every card game because it lowers the risk of running it. And now you also have Menno, which is the tutor. You have Skellen, which can abuse it. And, abuse tells the tale. Shinmiri was talking about a spreadsheet that he made that was abusing the fact that Bribery was broken. This kind of stuff will obviously be huge in popularity because, it's just how Gwent seems to go every now and then. You find something that's not working properly and you kind of dig at it a little bit. If it's like, also Calantha showing you your deck apparently is a thing right now. Pincer maneuver. Is that, can anybody confirm? Can you guys confirm or deny this one? Like when you use Calantha, you can see your deck.
I never actually paid attention. I remember seeing a post on Reddit. Apparently it shows you the deck in the correct order.
I don't want it to be true.
I never actually checked it for myself. I don't know why I never got around to it. I should actually check that. That's a good point. I need to get
Same.
to that.
I never tested it myself or took advantage of it while I was playing Calanthe, but I did see the video that was posted and it looks like it's an actual bug. It looks like it actually works.
Man, I did this back in the day with Dandelion when you could buff cards in your deck. And I think that Bran back in the day when he could discard cards from your deck also could do this. So this, the ghosts, they haunt. You think you think you've exercised them all, and all of a sudden it's like, didn't we have this problem before? Hopefully we can tighten it up. I think that the game is in a great spot. I think that we are primed for if they have some stuff lined up for November, I think it's a really good time to kind of hype us up for the year coming up. With the game being in a good spot, I am much more likely to recommend it, to play it. I mean, it's just, we just need to have get that extra motivation in there because, before the game was, all sorts of issues, but it was definitely competitive and we definitely had competitions. So it's almost a crime for it to not be in the spotlight right now when it's
I think all the changes and iterations gone through might have slowed down the momentum that Gwent had, but I think now it's in a pretty good spot, and I would like to see the momentum pick up again and going forward. See people making use of this greatly balanced game which we now have, and hopefully that'll translate to a more successful game going forward.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah. All right, guys, I think we can wrap it up here. This was great. We chatted for a nice hour about, the season of the cat, kind of a meta, the Iron Judgment meta that I think we will probably, I don't want to say, it sucks when I think about the way people talk about the golden metas of the metas that they like the most. Usually it's people who remember Nilfgaard Spies with a little bit of rose-colored glasses. It was good, but I mean, it wasn't the best thing in the world ever. It was good. But I think that we're going to remember this one. I think that we're going to remember this one for being a really diverse one, for sure. My friends, where can people find you, Shinmiri, when you're out there doing things, streaming, doing things for Team Aretuza? Let us all know your channels.
Yeah, I stream on my Twitch channel. That's Shinmiri2, the number 2 at the end. And I usually stream Monday through Friday, starting around this time, 7 p.m. CEST, 10 a.m. Pacific.
You're getting raring up to go then. Spyro,
Yeah, probably.
You got things started.
Yeah, I'll probably start up like a little bit in like maybe half an hour or so after this wraps up.
Right on. Okay, Spyro, is this true? Is it actually your birthday? I know this is a Twitch thing.
No,
it's
no,
not. Okay.
no.
I didn't want to address it. They've been saying it all podcast. I just wanted to make sure because I feel like we didn't we do this last time? I feel like we've had this conversation.
It's every day.
Okay, so
apparently every day is my birthday. I'm apparently 500 years old. I'm a vampire.
Oh man. When every day is your birthday, that's what it's like being Spyro. Spyro, where can people find you out there when you're doing your thing on Twitch?
I am live pretty much every single day. I stream from 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. CEST. My Twitch channel is Spyro _ ZA, and my YouTube, which I do try to upload when I have time, is just Spyro ZA, no spaces. And then you can also find me on Twitter, also Spyro2 _ ZA on Twitter. But yeah, pretty much just there. And yeah, I stream every day.
Everybody who's watching the stream right now, Tailbot had a huge host in here. 400 people came in to see the show, and we were just wrapping it up. But if you're interested in watching the show, you can watch the VOD right now. It starts off with me playing Syndicate and getting really mad at Lambert. It's really funny. And then on YouTube, of course, you'll be watching this right now. So if you like the video, show me, tell me. There's lots of ways to do this. Follow us on Twitter at Commandos Horn for updates on the next show. Follow me at McBeardCH on Twitter. Hang out with me at twitch.tv/McBearded on a pretty daily basis. I'm a little scheduleless at the moment, but I'm trying to stream every day. And watch the latest antics on my YouTube channel where I am McBeard. Search it up McBeard or go to youtube.com/c/McBeard. Shinmiri, Spyro, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day and coming on my show. I really appreciate it, and it was great to talk to you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was very nice discussing it with you guys.
All right. And everybody, thanks so much for watching in the chat, and thanks to all the Commandos and to everybody who's following along and to all my subs. And I think that'll be it. Best of luck on the path, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. I'll see you next time.